In 1978, Diana Ross was at the height of her fame as both a solo artist and former member of the Supremes. Her career had been a steady climb to the top since the 60s, and she was enjoying life as one of the biggest stars in the world. She was also dating one of the biggest stars of the time, the legendary singer and actor Lionel Richie. But their relationship would soon take an unexpected turn. It was the year of her biggest hit, Upside Down, which topped the charts worldwide and made her the most popular female artist in the world. The song's music video was groundbreaking for its use of special effects and innovative choreography. It became a staple of MTV and helped launch the channel into superstardom. And to this day, it remains one of the most iconic music videos ever made. However, despite all the success and adulation from fans, Diana was feeling a growing sense of unease in her relationship with Lionel. For some time now, she'd been aware that he was cheating on her with another woman. And recently, he'd become more open about his infidelity, even introducing his mistress to friends and colleagues. Diana knew she couldn't continue in the relationship any longer, but she was struggling with how to end things with him. Then one day, while watching the music video for Upside Down, something strange happened. As she watched herself dancing in the video, Diana saw something that made her stop in her tracks. In a split-second moment, she caught a glimpse of her own reflection in one of the cameras, and what she saw shocked her to the core. Her reflection wasn't just looking back at her, it was smiling. Not just any smile, a wide, mischievous grin that seemed to mock her pain and suffering. From that moment on, Diana began to believe that her reflection had a mind of its own, a kind of alter ego that was commenting on her life and choices. At first, these encounters were subtle. She'd catch a glimpse of her reflection in a shop window or a mirror, and it would be smiling at her knowingly. Then the incidents started to become more frequent and more intense. She began to see her reflection everywhere, in every shiny surface, it seemed. And every time she saw it, it was mocking her, taunting her with its smug grin. At first, Diana tried to ignore it. She thought it was just a trick of the light, or some kind of stress-induced hallucination. But as the weeks went by, she became increasingly disturbed by the grinning reflection. It felt like it was judging her, laughing at her pain and tormenting her with its silent mockery. As the tour went on, Diana's mental state began to deteriorate. She became increasingly withdrawn and reclusive, spending most of her time alone in her hotel room. She couldn't understand why her reflection was taunting her, why it seemed to be taking pleasure in her misery. And as she struggled to cope with the constant barrage of mockery, her performances began to suffer. She was forgetting lyrics and losing her place on stage. The joyful, energetic performer that audiences had come to know and love was replaced by a haunted, distracted shell of her former self. Diana's friends and colleagues were alarmed by the changes in her. They'd never seen her like this before, so distant and troubled. They tried to talk to her, to get her to open up about what was bothering her, but she just shut them out, unable to share the bizarre and terrifying experiences she was going through. It was as if her reflection was controlling her, bending her will and twisting her mind. One night, during a particularly grueling performance, Diana broke down on stage. As she stood there in the spotlight, tears streaming down her face, she realized she couldn't go on. She had to tell someone about the grinning reflection, even if no one believed her. So she did. She called her therapist and poured out her heart to him, telling him about the grinning reflection that was tormenting her. He listened patiently and then suggested that Diana take a break from the tour to focus on her mental health. But Diana knew it wasn't that simple. The grinning reflection was everywhere. It followed her everywhere she went. There was no escape from its mocking gaze. As her mental state continued to deteriorate, Diana began to withdraw from the world completely. She canceled the rest of her tour dates and retreated to her home in Los Angeles. There, she barricaded herself in her bedroom, convinced that the grinning reflection was out to get her, that it was using every mirror and reflective surface in the house to taunt and torment her. One day, Diana's sister noticed that the windows in Diana's bedroom were covered with heavy drapes. Even though it was the middle of the day and the room was dark, when she asked Diana why she had the drapes closed, Diana just stared at her blankly and whispered, "They're laughing at me." Her sister rushed to the window and pulled back the drapes. To her surprise, she saw that the glass was covered with hundreds of tiny smiling faces. It looked as if Diana's reflection had somehow come to life and was peering back at her from the other side of the glass. Her sister screamed in terror and ran to get help. Soon, the entire Ross family was gathered in Diana's room, staring in disbelief at the grinning reflections that now covered every inch of the glass. Diana's mother rushed to her daughter's side and cradled her close. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's just a trick of the light. It's not real." But Diana shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. "No, it's real," she whispered. "They're real." And then, as if on cue, the reflections began to move. They shifted and twisted, forming grotesque faces that leered and snarled. Some of the reflections raised their hands and pointed accusingly at Diana. Others shook their heads and jeered, their mouths twisted in cruel smiles. Diana screamed and buried her face in her mother's shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably. Now sobbing uncontrollably was only the beginning. Over the next few days, Diana's condition continued to deteriorate. The grinning reflections that had once been confined to her bedroom window now seemed to be everywhere. They lurked in every mirror and reflective surface, waiting to pounce. Diana became convinced that they were following her, that they were hunting her down to torment her. She spent her days locked in her room, too terrified to venture out. But the reflections didn't just stay in the mirrors. They began to appear in photographs. Diana would stare at the images after they were developed, convinced that she could see the smirks on their faces, hear their mocking laughter echoing in her ears. Sleep offered no escape either. Every night she would dream of the grinning reflections of their cold, dead eyes staring back at her, of their cruel smiles mocking her pain. As Diana's mental state continued to deteriorate, her friends and family grew increasingly concerned. They rallied together and made the difficult decision to commit her to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. Diana resisted at first, but ultimately succumbed to their pressure. She was placed under observation and given medication to help stabilize her condition. For the next several weeks, Diana underwent therapy and took medication under close supervision. Slowly but surely, her condition began to improve. The terrifying, grinning reflections that had haunted her for so long began to fade from her sight. And eventually, she was able to leave the hospital and return to her life. But the experience left an indelible mark on her. She became a changed person, haunted by the memory of the grinning reflections and the feeling that something dark and evil had been stalking her. She retreated from the public eye, shunning the fame and adulation that had once been her lifeblood. And she spent her days in seclusion, trying to piece together the shattered remnants of her life.
Ow.
To this day, Diana Ross has never fully recovered from the terrifying ordeal she endured during those dark days in 1978. The experience left her deeply traumatized, and she still struggles with the emotional and psychological scars it left behind. But she has also found solace in sharing her story, hoping that by speaking out, she can help others who have suffered similar terrifying experiences. The haunting tale of the grinning reflection serves as a reminder that sometimes the greatest horrors are the ones we can't unexplain.